And good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us as we get ever closer to Vermont Town Meeting Day coming up on Tuesday, March 7th. We have another show we're taping today, actually taping on Tuesday, February 21st, and we have some more candidates for the Georgia Selectboard. Georgia, one of the more active towns around here in terms of contested races, and happy to have on the set Shannon Jenkins. Shannon, good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Don Penney, who's on the Select Board, and Carl Rosenquist, another Select Board member who was appointed last year, but thanks for the time. And I should note the other candidate who I was hoping to have on the show, but who didn't make it, is Chuck Cross. And I should also note that these are these three folks here, and Chuck Cross are the four candidates running for 2 one-year terms. And earlier today, on, again, Tuesday, Feb 21, I interviewed 3 of the other candidates. There are 2 other contests as well. Doug Bergstrom, the chair of the Georgia Select Board, being challenged by Jamie Comstock for a 3-year term, and incumbent Select Board member Gary Wright being challenged by the Reverend Devin Thomas for a 2-year term. So a lot of activity in Georgia, that's for sure. Shannon, how about let's start with yourself. Just give us some background. How'd you happen to run for the Georgia Select Board?
Okay, my name is Shannon Jenkins. I have been living in Georgia for about 6.5 years. I see a need, a social need within our town, and I feel like the social fabric of our town is frayed, and I would love for the Select Board to be a facilitator of repairing that. I see some gaps for the elderly, the young, the teenagers in our town, and I would love for things like volunteering opportunities, just the Select Board being a facilitator, or a more prominent role of facilitating the social fabric of our town.
And tell us about yourself a little bit.
I have 3 kids. We're homeschoolers. The youngest is in pre-K at Georgia, but I'm not sure if he'll continue. I recently started working for the Department of Environmental Conservation for the state of Vermont, and I was before then a stay-at-home mom for a really long time.
Interesting. Have you any involvement in the town of Georgia in terms of positions or organizations?
No, I have just been involved in some rec committee things, some conservation things. I have seen Carl at a number of like environmental issues concerning the lake. So not specifically Georgia. I'm also a volunteer for the Abenaki tribe of Vermont. So I have done quite a number of things in Burlington for them, but for the most part, just a background and attending meetings and questions and just being an observer.
Very good. Don Penney. Don, you're elected a year ago to a 1-year term?
Yes, sir.
And so running for a second 1-year term?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, give us some background and tell us about yourself.
So you'll notice on the ballot, I'm actually Leslie Don Penney, which is my legal name.
Oh, really? You go by Don, typically?
I go by Don, yes. My husband and I moved to Georgia in 2006, and I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time and subbed at school, and then got involved working with the clerk's office at the town office, and through there have been doing the work with the rec commission for the past 2 years. And last year I decided to run for Select Board, mainly because I was hoping to streamline some processes of how things got started to how they got finished. Really because our town is in a changing state where we still identify as small, but our population is getting much larger. We're in a critical point where when we compete for employees, we're competing against cities and people who have huge business infrastructure tax bases that we don't have. So we really have to be very mindful and very diligent about how we move forward. And I really wanted to be a part of it.
Interesting. And again, you're an assistant town clerk.
Right, so the
Any
clerk,
any conflicts with being on the select board with that position?
thanks for bringing it up, yeah. So the clerk's
I had the
position,
same question earlier for Doug Bergstrom, who I guess just learned today is the town zoning administrator.
yes.
Interesting.
So for the clerk's position, the clerk is an elected position.
Yeah.
So whoever she or he hires is at their discretion. So if there was a new person that came in, they can just hire new staff. So everything that goes through the clerk's office is pretty specific, it's pretty straightforward, and it's already got a lot of processes that are just working pretty well. So there really is not a lot of overlap because everything that goes through the clerk's office doesn't go through the select board because a clerk is actually the same as a select board member as they were voted in by the public.
Cheryl
So,
Letourneau being the town clerk at
Yes.
this point.
right.
Interesting. Carl, not a familiar face around here. Ask you about the legislature or maybe mixed emotions about not being in Montpelier anymore, but
Yeah.
tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
You and I have known each other for a number
Yeah,
of years.
been a while.
We've been involved in a lot of things in the community, both, at the county, state, and, of course, at the local level. I'm a combat veteran, having served during the Vietnam conflict. I then went back to school, received my Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry and Biology, and planned to go to medical school, but had family came along, and before I know it, life comes along. So I didn't go to medical school. Instead, I went into production management for Kraft Foods, and then I was hired by Wyeth Nutritionals to essentially site and then build and then manage the nutritional plant, which is now in Georgia under Perigo's management. My wife, as you said, I ran for the House a couple of times and served both in 2001, 2002, the first time, and then more recently from 2017 to 2022. So I've just finished that stint, if you will. I served on the Georgia School Board for 8 years, and a number of years ago when we added the addition to the school that connected the two buildings. Okay, and my wife and I have lived in town for 39 years and raised our 5 children primarily here, and many of them went through the Georgia school system and then to St. Albans or Essex. Okay, and anyway, in May, as I was stepping down from the legislature, there was an opening on the select board, and I thought the problem they seemed to be having was continuity because so many people had resigned, both key staff members and members of the select board. So given that opportunity, I stepped forward to say maybe I could bring some stability and experience to the select board, and that brought me to it. Okay, and why I'm running again, I think we've accomplished a lot in the several months I've been on at this point in time, and I'd like to see some of those initiatives and the building of our management team at the town office completed. And so that's primarily why I'm running for a 1-year term at this point in time.
Very good.
Excuse me.
Shannon, with your campaign, are you able to do much campaigning? Any dominant issues that you're running into when you talk to folks about running for the select board?
Mostly transparency. I think that people are feeling left out. I think there was a few issues, rec money being one of them, ARPA funds being another, that people feel, we understand that there's turmoil for the budget, and that there has been, just turmoil in terms of continuity, just like Carl said. But I think that people feel left out, and that they're not being consulted about these issues, nor are they being let into the conversation. And I fully understand that it has been difficult for the select board to straighten out all of the issues. I just think what I've been hearing mostly is that people aren't feeling heard or seen, and aren't being let in to these processes.
Don, I'll give you a chance, you want to react to that or not? Your call.
Sure. I mean, I ran a year ago, and transparency was one of the main things that I addressed. Last year, the budget meeting was done, and there was no recording of it, and things weren't even put on the minutes that were brought up. We were very purposeful in doing not one budget meeting, but in excess of 10 budget meetings, having them all on minutes, having them all posted publicly, having them all recorded. I will acknowledge it is difficult getting the extra step, but we don't have the extra part-time employee that would be very helpful for that. So that is part of what Carl was saying in trying to get a management team and streamline it. It's completely where we are. It's exactly what we're acknowledging, and it's exactly what we're trying to change moving forward. But ultimately, transparency is the exact thing that we are doing a very good job of, because all of the issues that everybody is discussing are issues that are brought up and have been brought to the table and have been brought to the public. And outside of the transparency thing, I don't think we disagree on a whole lot.
Yeah.
But that one, I'm pretty steadfast, because we were very mindful. We gave whatever information we had at the time.
Carl, do you feel the board's being as transparent as it should be? Your thoughts?
I believe so. I mean, since this is my first time on the select board, I've
Right.
been on a lot of other boards,
Right.
but, as I say, on the school board for a long period of time. But I think we've been very open at the select board meetings to hear people talk on general issues and more specifically on issues that are on the agenda. And if anything, some people think we allow people to talk too much in some of our meetings. I know when the first few meetings I attended were in excess of 3, maybe even 4 hours, I think, the first couple of meetings. So, and then we tried to, how shall I say it, try to be more specific in what we're dealing with sometimes and not get drawn off center. But I think, in the budget building process, it was very tedious. We had some issues because our treasurer has another full-time job, and even though she's our treasurer, we could see her on a case-by-case basis. She wasn't available all the time, and accordingly, it was a little more problematic than I anticipated it being to build the budget. When there was some pieces missing from time to time, we had to go and get those pulled together. But as Dawn said, I think, what did you say? We had 14?
I didn't count them. I said in
Okay,
excess of
but yeah,
10.
there was a slew of meetings. We had each department come in and give us their presentation of what they wanted, their grand list, when if they could have everything they wanted type view, okay, and then what is more realistic, what do you actually need to get your job done? And hopefully we met somewhere in between for most of the departments. And then obviously you massage the budget to try to meet objectives of affordability for the people of Georgia. And that's always, we started out that on the surface, all the stuff that people wanted and the things we wanted to do was in excess of 30%. And we said, well, that's unacceptable. Okay, so we had to do trimming. Trimming is always hard. Even your family budget, it's hard. It's definitely hard on a municipal budget. So anyway, I'm sorry, I don't mean to
No,
go
it's okay.
on. So.
Speaking of the budget, it's a little over about a $3.7 million budget. Can I assume the two select board members here support the budget as proposed?
Yes, sir.
Shannon, what about yourself? Any thoughts on the budget? Do you support the budget?
I don't fully know what is in the budget. I feel like that's one of the things that we could maybe be more, that the select board could be reaching out to the public a little bit more about. We know that Georgia got, I think, in excess of $1.1 million in ARPA funds, and I feel that maybe that's one of the things that we are unsure about. Those funds, I know that in the budget meeting that you guys had laid out some specific projects that the ARPA funds were for. I think that some community members had also thought about community building options for some ARPA funds, but didn't feel invited into the conversation about it. And obviously, I don't know everything about the budget or things like that, but I do know that some people are wanting to use those funds, or, you know, concerned about a police budget or an EMS position, full-time position. So I think that in terms of the budget, I think, you know, there is an informational session happening at the fire department, I believe.
In fact, yeah, Tuesday, Feb. 28. Again, we're taping the show on the 21st, so Tuesday, Feb. 28, 7 p.m. at the firehouse, an informational meeting. Unfortunately, I've been to a million informational meetings in my reporting life, and not too many people show. Hopefully, you'll get a decent turnout,
Yeah.
obviously.
I think we will.
Yeah.
Just because of some of the issues before us.
And we'll get into some of those. Yeah, there's some noteworthy issues for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the ARPA, and again, ARPA, of course, American Rescue Plan Act funds, is it 1.5? How much did Georgia get? Is it
Just shy of 1.5. I think
almost
it's 1.48 or
And
something.
is that money, have you decided what to do with all that money or not? No. And you
No,
still
we've
have some-
allocated certain amount.
Okay.
Obviously, I mentioned before that the budget, initial budget numbers were very high.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was due to some somewhat mandatory bridge repairs that need to be done in town. So several $100,000 of ARPA money is going into, well, yeah, at least 200,000, I think, is going into bridge restoration in town. And we, as an initiative, we heard from the community that they were interested in getting into more Georgia-based recreational activities for our kids and our community. And so we've dedicated 500, is it 3 or 5? I'm trying to remember now. All of a sudden, I can't remember. Of ARPA funds to fund a temporary, not a temporary, a 3-year experimental position.
200.
200? No, I think it's, but anyway, I'm sorry. All of a sudden, that number escapes me. But anyway, those are ARPA funds that we have set aside to pay for that position and the startup of some recreational activities in town to hopefully take care of that. Now, a lot of people were concerned because they thought we weren't then providing for the swimming pool activities that we did last year.
For St. Albans,
Georgia.
that's been, it sounds like a big
Right,
issue.
right, but
Georgia, and you, I think, allocated, what, appropriated 18,000 or
Yes,
something?
we did that last year and we did it this year, even though it's more specifically directed towards the swimming program, not necessarily some of the summer camps and other things we
Yeah.
thought were not very targeted. So it's 18,000 directed towards the swimming program to subsidize people that want to attend from Georgia.
And again, that 18,000, is that in the budget that's being proposed?
Correct.
Okay. Shannon, is that a good part of that budget? Do you think some funds should be, you know, to help out Georgia folks pay less to go to, I guess, in particular, the St. Albans Community Swimming Pool?
Yeah, the program was obviously very popular because it ran out early, and I think that a lot of people's concern was that it ran out so early and didn't start back up until after summer camp registrations happen, and same thing with spring registrations for sports. Both of my sons do lacrosse through the Phantoms, and so that a lot of people felt like that since we didn't have those programs in our town, that it was very helpful to have a subsidy to St. Albans. And I think a lot of people felt out of that committee meeting where they had decided, and I fully understand the limitations of the budget. I think that it just came out as we had already decided this thing without input, and people felt unheard once again. The loneliness is an epidemic in our culture and in this current time, and I feel like any way to get people connected and out and doing together is something that we should prioritize investing in, whether it's the elderly or young kids, young mothers, teenagers, which we don't really have any programs in our town for, that something like the rec money could really be an asset to the people of our town. My oldest daughter will be 15 in June, and as a homeschooler, and any teenager in our town, unless you're in a religious community, there is nothing for them. And I feel like, another aspect, and I'm sorry this is off topic, but another aspect that people are concerned about is things like, small crimes, our mailboxes getting hit, kids speeding, things like that. But I think for things like connecting our community and having our kids know their neighbors and just connecting people and having programs where a community is connected and knowing of each other, then some of those gaps could be filled. And I think tying back to the rec money, that having an avenue for teenagers to do something close to our town is a real asset for them and their family members.
Yeah. Don, start with you. Article 1, noteworthy article. So voters authorize the select board to appoint a town treasurer. And I guess there's some history with that issue, but that's something you support?
I support the fact that we definitely do not agree around the table. It is something that must go out to the voters. And then it's easy, right? We get to sit at the table after the vote. We see how the people of Georgia feel, and then we respect their decision and we move forward accordingly.
But there's disagreement among the 5 members of the select board now?
Well, there's disagreement within my head. I mean,
Oh.
it's just such a tippy-toppy way to look at it. On one way, if we appoint somebody, then we have the ability to hire and fire. We have the ability to do a background check. We have the ability to hold a person accountable. The other side is, if everybody votes for somebody, then there's the feeling of democracy. It's not a feeling, it is democracy. And that's it at its finest. The problem lies in, are we now at the point where we're big enough that we need to be able to hire somebody who is specific, who does the job and is accountable at that level?
In the past, a lot of towns, the town clerk is typically the town treasurer also. Was that the case in Georgia for many years too? Cheryl Letourneau is just ran for, she's the town clerk and had never ran. Was she treasurer at all at time?
No, she wasn't. But in the past, going back a number of years ago, the town clerk and the treasurer were the same. Okay. And
I mean, there were 2 positions. It was typically the one person who
held both positions, right? So, but then more recently, the town administrator, the former town administrator, was also the treasurer. So that was a little different configuration. Okay, and the town administrator was one of those key people that resigned here, back in the spring. Okay, and at that time we then put the town administrator and the town clerk together. We already had what we thought a very good and stable town clerk, and we asked her if she would be willing to do both jobs. So she then became the town administrator and the town clerk, and that's the way we're going forward at this point in time.
Do you support Article 1? Do you support appointing the town treasurer?
I do. I think what we found, again, like I mentioned during budget building, we really need a very close association of the treasurer with the board in building the budget. I mean, in my past dealings in business community and the plant which I manage and all that, the financial person reports to the administration, and that is the way I would see it working better going forward, definitely as far as the budget reporting and the budget building process.
Yeah. Shannon, your thoughts? Are you going to be supporting appointing a town treasurer?
I agree with Don. It's a hard decision to try to make for people. As just a general taxpayer, obviously I would love to have input and would say I would love to vote on it. But I do see the positive aspect, like Carl said, about being able to appoint somebody, to be able to properly vet them. I think that we ran into a little bit of a funny situation with our sheriff at the last vote, where, you know, he was in a funny position, and people with just having name recognition voted for him again, and
Of course, he was the only name on the ballot, which obviously helped him.
Yep. And so I could see how just having a name on a ballot, that maybe some people forget the homework that they had done and the research they had done and who it is that they wanted to vote for. And so that putting the vote to the people can maybe elect not the best person for the position. And so I don't really have a straight answer, other than, as a taxpayer, I would love to have a say in who it is, but I could see from the position of the select board wanting to appoint someone.
Has anybody got a feel for how that article is going to go at town meeting? No.
I think it'll go through.
You think it'll pass?
I think ultimately, it's really where we are in the size of a town, right? As the town gets bigger, that job becomes more and more accountable, and we need to have access to that person more and more, and they need to have specific municipal training. So, you know, it gets to a point where you can't just go, oh, okay, well, when we'll move this here or we'll move that. Like, we need somebody there. We need that information.
That does seem to be a bit of a trend. I'm a longtime St. Albans City resident. The city, a year or two ago, of course, changed the charter to appoint, authorizing the city council to appoint town clerk and treasurer. And of course, in the city's case, it may be typical for other towns, before that happened, the town clerk and treasurer had to be a St. Albans City resident. So just a concern about not enough candidates, or concern about the perhaps lack of qualifications for the candidates. So seems to be something of a trend. Another article, Article 3, shall voters authorize the expenditure of up to $90,000 to hire a full-time firefighter / EMT. Carl, I'll start with you. Do you support that? Is that a good way to go?
I do support it. When we put it to the voters, because again, the budget was going to be more than we wished, without taking that into consideration and trying to do the recreation issues and other things which we thought were a lot of people in the community were for. We thought, well, that we'd put this on as a separate ballot item. And but I think a lot of people are for it. There are others that are going to think 90,000, and that's fully loaded, in terms of benefits and all that sort of stuff. So it sounds like an excessive amount of money, but when you really think of it, it's not that out of line with salaries that would be required to bring in a qualified person to that position.
Yeah. Don, do you support that?
I'm still on the fence with that one
Really?
too. It's a $90,000 position. It is something that, again, are we at the point of where we need this or we don't need this? But $90,000 is a recurring cost that we're going to have to put to the taxpayers every year.
Would you
And
just
then-
sorry, just a question, if it gets approved this time around, presumably in the future, that 90,000 would be part of the regular budget, or, so this would be the one time would be voted on separately, assuming it's passed this time?
Right.
It would be part of the regular budget down the road?
Right, so the
Okay, sorry to
90,000,
interrupt you.
no, please. The $90,000 will have to be added to the total
Right,
budget if this
right,
passes.
right.
And that's for this year.
Right.
Ultimately, a fire department is not going to respond with one person. So this is something that if we're at the point of needing a full department, we'll see based on that vote.
Yeah.
And that number will go up year after year until where a full fire department would be.
Interesting. The fire department, like so many other places, having problems getting enough volunteers. How's the staffing for the fire department these days? Is that
We're in pretty good shape, I
pretty good
believe.
shape.
But I mean, you can always use more volunteers.
yeah.
I mean, I think they're still looking for at least three additional people as volunteers.
Yeah, but Georgia's got plenty of company, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So may I just follow
Yeah,
up on
sure.
that? We just had a recent incident on the lake down by, the boat access in Georgia, where a gentleman was out on the ice and called for help because he was unable to get back to shore. And I know right away, people started thinking if we only had that EMT, somebody right there at the firehouse, maybe. And in this case, it did go well. I mean, that person was rescued and taken off the ice. But I think that's a sort of incident that people are looking to say, wouldn't it be useful to have somebody that's there immediately on call?
Yeah.
And we're hoping this person can do other things for us, as well as follow up to different issues that the fire department needs to take care of as well. So
Yeah, St. Albans Town went that route a few years ago with having one paid full-time. Happens to be the chief. Shannon, your thoughts on the spending up to $90,000 for the firefighter EMT?
Yeah, I support it. I think that our town is big enough at this point, and I appreciate our volunteers. They've been great and have gotten us this far. But I do think, like Carl said, that having a full-time staff member would be a great asset for continuity and just organizing and just having somebody there consistently that feels valued enough to get a full-time salary. I think that I think it's needed at this point.
Would you expect maybe have any members of the Georgia Fire Department express interest? Might that person, if voters approve it, come out of the fire department? Who knows? Possibly. Who knows?
I don't know at this point.
Sure.
I haven't had that conversation with Chief Baker, who's our fire chief, but I'm sure they'd obviously be eligible to try to qualify if the opportunity arose.
Back to the issue again, voters will decide whether to authorize the select board again to appoint a town treasurer. Was there any thought given to doing the same thing with the town clerk?
There is, well, for me there is. I think it's, but I don't want it to be, I go back to the democracy piece. If it doesn't pass for a treasurer, then do we do it again and ask for a clerk? Right, it's the same thing. I don't want the townspeople to feel like we're taking their voice away when the democracy of the whole process is their voice. It's still eligible to get brought back, but I don't want them to feel like we're taking something from them.
Did the board give that some discussion, though, to have both, asking voters to appoint a town treasurer as well as a town clerk, or did that not really come up in the select board's discussions?
It's been discussed, definitely.
discussed.
Okay, but, at this point, people get nervous when you change everything or try to change too much at once. So that's what I was talking about. I want to be on for another year myself to see some of our initiatives carried forward and see if we can't even strengthen further our management team and the, what would you call it, cohesiveness of the board and the board trying to be as responsive to our citizens as we can be and still get our work done.
I just want to mention for folks watching us, again, we're talking to the 3 of the 4 candidates seeking the 2 one-year terms on the Georgia Selectboard: Carl Rosenquist, Don Penney, incumbents on the board, and Shannon Jenkins, and Charles Chuck Cross declined to join us. But got a lot going on in Georgia. Again, I probably should mention in the other contests in Georgia, again, the board chair, Doug Bergstrom, being challenged by Jamie Comstock for a 3-year term, and incumbent Gary Wright being challenged by the Reverend Devin Thomas for a 2-year term. So a lot going on. And again, that public informational meeting coming up Tuesday, Feb 28 at 7 p.m. I think, Shannon, you might have touched on this briefly. Police coverage, another issue that Georgia has gotten a fair amount of attention for with the kind of the flap with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. The former sheriff, Roger Langevin, inherited a contract from his predecessor, Bob Norris, now state senator Bob Norris, and the former sheriff was looking for more money, so there wasn't enough money in it for the sheriff's department. Anyway, and I guess they couldn't reach an agreement with the Georgia Select Board. So anyway, Georgia went the route of getting some coverage from the Milton Police Department. How do you think that's working out? Is that the way to go in the at least near-term future?
I don't think we have a lot of options, is what it seems like.
You think
And
you should at least talk to the new sheriff in Franklin County, John Grismore, and see if you can strike a deal with the new sheriff? Is that worth doing?
Possibly. I don't know all the options, nor do I know the budget for police coverage. I do know that people have a concern, and I understand that, and I don't share some of the same concerns, but I do know that there are some things that we can do as a community to help ourselves. And back to the social issues, I think that if there were better, if the select board better facilitated community action and community cohesiveness, that some of these things could be helped. Like I said, helping neighbors, that if we better knew our neighbors' kids, that we could have a better relationship with them. I think the social safety net is something that I see that we don't really have. I think about the elderly. I think about Age Well and Meals on Wheels and our issues with that. I feel like some people are falling through the cracks. And same thing with the teenager issue of kids speeding or doing stuff on the weekends, that if we had a better way to organize and be a better collective community, that some of these things could be helped. And I'm not saying that that is a substitute for police presence, but I do think that those are some things that we could do now while we have a conversation in terms of budget and options for police.
Don, back to Milton PD. Are you happy with the coverage? I know you're not getting a lot of coverage. In fact, I'm under the impression you'd like to get more coverage than you're getting. But has that gone as well as it could be? Are you happy with what Milton PD's done?
So Milton right now are in negotiations for their own contract. So they need to sort of square away their own community before they decide to take on or not take on. We have put so many hours into trying to figure out what the best way to go about this, how to move forward. I know I took off for a while and tried to figure out how much it would cost to fund a police department.
Nothing you're looking to do anytime soon.
Oh my goodness, I was off by so much.
We're talking a lot of bucks.
Yeah. I figure honestly, it's about $5 million to get it up and running, and possibly $3 million a year. So we're looking at doubling our budget if we wanted to do that, and that's if we have people to hire.
Do you think it's worth? Again, we have a new sheriff in town. Is it worth talking to the sheriff about trying to strike up another deal with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, or have you got no interest in that?
I am willing to listen to any option.
But you haven't taken the initiative. The board hasn't taken the initiative.
I personally haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing much of the police work.
Yeah.
I mean, we sort of have divided and conquered a lot of our loads on the board to try to smooth things out, and then we come to the table and bring them together. So I've been doing a little more with the recreation department because I'm a member of the events committee for Georgia, and I have children myself that are still active and still sort of involved, so it just made it a little more seamless for me to do that stuff.
Carl, Milton PD, what do you think? Is this the way to go?
Well, I think an exciting thing we heard, not necessarily Milton, but that St. Albans Town and St. Albans City are looking to build a combined police force.
In fact, St. Albans,
I already made some mention to the town manager up there, the boy. I'm sure we would be interested in talking to them when they built that structure.
That's right. Yeah, St. Albans City PD will again resume coverage, take command of coverage in the town come July 1st, 2024.
I know. I mean, they have to build that force first. So, I mean, they're not interested in speaking to us at this point because they just got to get their own thing pulled together.
Do you think you should speak to the Sheriff's Department, which is...
I'll have to say, that's a possibility. We of course, as I say, we sort of severed ties, or they severed ties with us back
do you feel, again,
2 years ago.
Do you feel you made the right decision? I guess I was a little surprised that a compromise couldn't have been reached when...
I wasn't on, and I don't think she was either.
Nothing.
I would have hoped they could have reached compromise.
I guess a little surprised there couldn't have been a compromise, but...
Yeah, I'm a great believer in compromise, and I think if I had been there, I would have pushed for, I think some people thought a deal's a deal, and we're not willing to go back to the table. And, I think that was unrealistic in retrospect, and maybe we could have continued that coverage, so.
Boy, you're not getting, I think, is it just 10 hours a week for Milton
Yeah, I mean,
PD?
it's-
You're not-
it's
It's very
a
little
pittance.
coverage at this point.
And they're not, they're, at this point, they can't really promise us any more coverage because, like Dawn said, they're going through a negotiation process with their staff. And even then, they're probably going to be pretty, all police departments are having a hard time recruiting. So they're understaffed and they're not going out and just scrambling to provide services to other communities.
Right, but you're good for that 10 hours at least? Well, I mean, that's good. That'll hold. Is there any
I
chance?
believe
Milton-
we're, between, because we get some coverage from the state police, we pay for a
Sure.
certain amount of patrol for the state police as well. So I think the combined is the 10 hours, really.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's just 10 from Milton or not. Do you recall which?
I don't think it's 10 for Milton. I think it's 10 combined.
Is that right? Not even? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
no, we
it's a
still have-
pittance, I mean, it just,
Wow.
it's almost just a swat at it. But right at the moment, we really are not in a financial position to come up with a better solution at the moment.
And we're still covered for emergency issues, right? There's still a response for emergency issues. I would like to say it has actually been a lot of fun on the board with Mr. Rosenquist. When it comes to finding middle ground, he is an absolute genius at it, and it has been fun to watch him.
Whoa.
He's been excellent with it. Yeah, no, I mean, you're good at it.
Well, I try.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it's a great learning experience, right? To sit people down and to figure out, what you need versus what you want, and then how we can maneuver all moving forward. And that's part of trying to get everybody on the same page.
Here's some talk about Georgia having a downtown, I guess, the South Village area. Shannon, does that mean much to me? Does that sound like a good initiative, such as it is?
Can you elaborate?
Well, I
on
guess I'd
specifically what
probably
you're
rather
talking about?
start with the.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I just want to make sure that, like, the building, is that what?
No, sure. Let me start with these because
Okay,
I'm hardly
sure.
on top of this. But again, there's
Okay.
been some. I've seen some stories, but about
Right.
Georgia having kind of a downtown area. I guess South Village, Carl, is that in
Correct.
its
There's
infancy?
the
or-
South Village concept is to, that was where we try to encourage construction and building of homes and all. The biggest problem we have is sewer and water. We do not have
Lack
capacity.
thereof, obviously.
Yeah, lack thereof for denser populations. In other words, houses of 1 or 2 acres, they have their own septic. Okay.
Right.
Now you start putting condominiums or more dense housing, you need centralized waste management and water. And those are the issues before us. And right now, I think the South Village is somewhat stalled until that is accomplished. Okay.
Dawn, does that sound like a good initiative down the road, possibly, or?
Sure. I mean, having a business community in Georgia would be great. We'd have a better tax base to run things through. We'd have a better budget. But ultimately, we're stalled until there's water and sewer.
And I suspect a water waste or a wastewater facility is about as likely anytime soon as a police department. We're talking, obviously, I assume big. Have you looked into that at all, about the cost of having, in part of town, a wastewater facility, or not really?
I'm sure there's been some speculation, not in my time on the board, but I mean, I would just, since at my former place of business, the plant down there in Georgia, we had an extensive waste treatment system there. And so based on the cost of something like that, you're looking at 15 to 20 million probably in that order, if not higher. So, and first of all, it's the planning. A lot of money goes into the engineering, the conceptual design, and then you actually have to construct it. So that's it's going to be an expensive proposition if it happens.
Yeah, it sounds like, a real back burner. Does anybody ask you about that? It sounds like it's a real
Yes.
kind of back burner issue.
No, but I think that people are thinking about things like sidewalks, places to spend their money within their community. I know that we would all love more of that. Also, housing is obviously of a great need, and I know that there's somebody interested in developing, and I would love for that to happen. I think, like I said, building sidewalks into new building projects, or building sidewalk plans into new building projects would be such a great asset. There are so many roads that people use that have no shoulders and no sidewalks. There are walkers and bikers and everybody, and every time they go out, it's a danger, and there's nowhere for our kids to go on their own to be able to ride their bikes or anything like that. So I know that sidewalks are a big point of interest for people. We have one section by the Georgia Market, which is used. And so I would love to see, with more building projects in Georgia, the ability for people to safely recreate.
One hears a lot about homelessness these days, certainly in the news in Burlington, probably just about every day. Is that a problem in Georgia? Is that a problem in Georgia? Is homelessness? Are there X number of homeless people in Georgia? Shannon, do you know? Or
I don't know, and I
not-
wish that I did have that information. I know that food insecurity is a great issue, and I do know that housing is an issue in terms of accessible housing, and that without those things, without accessible housing, we start to lose out on things that, you know, we had talked about recently, the diversity and inclusion statement, and how I felt like our town was a little bit getting left behind in terms of population increase and having our kids exposed to the greater world. And obviously that topic is loaded and is difficult to deal with when they're just getting the budget sorted out. But I do think that housing accessibility would be a great access, or a great aspect that we need in our town. And that all these things tie in together of just the social fabric of Georgia.
Don, homelessness, has that come up at all? Are you aware? Is that a problem in Georgia? There's some homeless folks, or?
Honestly, I'm not terribly aware of it. I do know that Georgia is one of the lowest when it comes to free and reduced lunch at school. We're low at the 17, give or take, %, which means, honestly, we're very, very well-to-do community. And for the most part, Georgia's very lucky. Most people own their homes. We certainly are a very, very blessed community. And I think when it comes to the housing issues and those sort of things, a lot of that is more with the planning commission. And so honestly, I'm sorry, I don't know much more than that.
It's okay. Carl, has that come up at all in your travels?
No, it has not. It's at this point in time, so we're very thankfully, well, it's not a problem at this point. It doesn't mean it could not become.
Can I comment really quick?
Yeah.
We had a neighbor further down our road, not a close neighbor, because I do know all of our neighbors, but she was an employee at Maple Fields and wound up losing her home. And we later found out that she had no heat, and then the house got repossessed and she wound up sleeping in her car in the driveway. And I felt heartbroken that not only did I not know that this was going on, but that she didn't have somebody that she could turn to for programs that could help her. And that I felt like, had we known as a community that there would have been some way to fundraise for her so that she at least had heat when she was there, and to help her in her next step. And that was one of the things that really affected me in my privilege, and I, as a low-income family, we, up until just 3 weeks ago, were a one-income family, that I felt like I could have done something, and I didn't know, and she did not have the resources available to her, and that drove me to want to be more involved and to reach out to my neighbors, which I have done through a food project that my neighbor and I have started and want to continue, of just making sure people who fall through the cracks have someone to turn to and have someone available that they can reach out and share the burden.
Just down to a few minutes, a huge subject, Lake Champlain water quality issues. Carl, you're certainly dealing with that in Montpelier, more than a little, I guess. Does it come up before the town much? Is that a...
Oh, yes. Dr. Kent Henderson heads up the Northern
Friends
Lake
of Northern
Champlain.
Lake
Yeah,
Champlain.
right.
Yeah.
And he's been very active in keeping us aware of projects on the lake.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's a lot of money every year to do things for the lake. And but it's important to us because we have a good amount of shore frontage.
Sure do.
And we want the lake to not stink or grow out, objectionable algae or what have you. So it's an issue for us, and we need to keep on top of it.
Tom, that issue comes up. Does that come up in your travels and your campaigning?
It has, and that was part of our discussion when we were building the budget. We allocated more money for Friends when Dr. Henderson came in and gave us a little synopsis of what he's doing. And we're also lucky. We have Carolyn, who's on our board currently. And
Carolyn Brannigan?
right, who's going to stay on the board next year. She's also a board member for Friends. So we have a little liaison there, which is nice.
Shannon, does that come up in your campaigning travels?
It hasn't, but it is a subject near and dear to my heart. I am an environmentalist, as I would imagine we all are. And I think working for the DEC now and seeing the funds available, I think that is something that you guys have also talked about as a grant writer for our town, and that there's so much available to the towns of Vermont for things like projects for clean water that we're missing out on, and that there's a great need for a grant writer, because some of these things, the cost share burden could be mitigated by grants and awards and things like that.
Just about out of time. How about 30 seconds or so to succinctly make your case? Why would you quickly be a good person to be elected to the Georgia Select Board?
Just that I'm a community member that cares, and I see a need, and that if my kids know that I see a need and that I didn't do anything, that what would I tell them? That I saw a need and I didn't do anything, and change requires action, and so that's what I'm trying to do.
Very good. Dawn, give you 30 seconds or so. Make your case.
I feel like I started a job and I want to see it through. Being on the select board has been a lot of work. There's a lot of time dedicated to it. There's a lot of learning in this process. And I've been really lucky to have 4 board members with tons of experience. And it has been a pleasure. I enjoy the fact that when we sit on the select board, it's more of a broader topic than when I sit on for the community events and we put off things and we try to get members of our town involved. Like, there's a lot of ways to get involved and to be specific and to do what you want to do. And I think for me, I'm loving this process, and I just would like to continue it.
Carl, appointed last year. You'd like to be elected this time around.
Correct. I'd like to, one more year, to try to finish up some of the things we've accomplished so far this year. One of my biggest concerns is the civility issue that we all encounter from social media, and I intend to conduct myself with civility in my dealings with the public and the citizenry, and I wish others that would reciprocate, that currently are unfortunately saying a lot of derogatory things towards people in town, and especially the current select board. So that's the way I close.
Okay, that's going to do it. Again, candidates for, we have 3 of the 4 candidates for a 1-year term in the Georgia Select Board. Carl Rosenquist, Don Penney, and Shannon Jenkins hoping to get on there. And again, Chuck Cross is the other candidate. Again, the 4 candidates for the 2 1-year terms. I appreciate the time. Good luck,
you.
town meeting day not far away. Then we'll have coverage here on Northwest Access TV. Thanks to producer Josh for doing all the hard work. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. We'll see you next time here on Northwest Access TV. See you.